Here is something the missile defense industry has known for a very long time and has never quite figured out how to say publicly. There is a category of weapon that the systems protecting your cities were simply not designed to stop. Not because the engineers weren't smart enough. Not because the defense budget was too small. But because the physics of the threat changed faster than the architecture of the defense could adapt. That weapon is a true hypersonic glide vehicle. And the conversation about whether Iran has one right now, or is close to having one, is not an academic debate. It is a live operational question with consequences that stretch from Tel Aviv to Riyadh to Washington, D.C. Let's start with what the word actually means, because it gets thrown around in ways that obscure more than they illuminate. A hypersonic weapon, at the basic definitional level, is any projectile traveling beyond Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound, roughly 3,800 miles per hour at sea level. By that definition, plenty of ballistic missiles already qualify. When an intercontinental ballistic missile re-enters the atmosphere on its way down to a target, it routinely reaches Mach 10 or higher. That's not new. That's been the case since the Cold War. The reason people started using the word hypersonic as though it described something revolutionary is because of what comes next in the sentence. What makes modern hypersonic weapons genuinely different and genuinely dangerous to existing defense infrastructure is not speed alone. It is the combination of hypersonic speed and controlled maneuverability at that speed. A traditional ballistic missile follows a predictable. It is an extraordinarily complex technical achievement, but it is fundamentally a solution to a predictable problem. The missile goes up, the missile comes down, you know roughly where it's going. A hypersonic glide vehicle doesn't follow that arc. It's launched into the upper atmosphere, then glides along the edge of space at hypersonic speed while maintaining the ability to adjust its flight path. It can maneuver laterally. It can change altitude. It can approach from angles that existing radar geometries were not positioned to detect in time. And here is the specific physics problem that Jack Wattling of the Royal United Services Institute identified so precisely. Radar works within line of sight. If a missile is flying low and fast, the curvature of the Earth and the presence of terrain features physically block the radar return until the weapon is very close to its target. If it comes over the horizon, you suddenly see it, Wattling said, and then it's over. By the time your system detects it, calculates its vector, and initiates an intercept, the weapon may already be past the effective engagement envelope. Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed it fired what they called Fattah 1 hypersonic missiles at Israel. Fattah means the conqueror in Farsi. The branding is confident. The military reality is more complicated. Most independent experts who analyzed the available evidence concluded that while the Fattah 1 does travel at hypersonic speed, it lacks the sustained maneuverability that gives next-generation hypersonics their strategic significance. Yehoshua Kaliski, a senior researcher at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies and a former scientist in Israeli defense industries, offered a notably specific assessment. Israel has been able to intercept more than 95% of everything Iran has fired because speed alone, maneuverability is. And the Fattah 1, he said, has limited maneuverability. The intercept rate reflects that assessment in practice. Iran fired over 400 missiles in one of the opening salvo phases of this conflict. Israel's layered defense system, Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, with American THAAD and Patriot batteries providing backup, intercepted the overwhelming majority. The number that got through, however, was not zero. Roughly 4% caused damage or casualties. When you fire 400 missiles and 4% penetrate, that is 16 warheads landing in Israeli territory. In a country geographically comparable to New Jersey, 16 impacting warheads is not an insignificant outcome. But here's what keeps Israeli and American defense planners up at night. It is not the Fattah 1. The Fattah 1 has been measured and partially solved. What has not been deployed, and this is the critical intelligence gap, are two other weapons in Iran's arsenal, the Fattah 2 and the Khorramshahr ballistic missile. These are described by Kaliski as more difficult to intercept, more maneuverable, higher velocity, lower predictability, and neither one has been used yet. Iran is holding something back. Whether that reflects strategic calculation, a deterrent asset kept in reserve, or technical limitations in their production capacity is unknown. But the gap between what Iran has used and what Iran has not used defines the entire risk profile of this conflict for the next phase. To understand why this matters globally, you have to zoom out and look at the arms race context. The United States and China are the only nations currently operating what most military experts would classify as genuine next-generation hypersonic weapons. The U.S. is mounting hypersonic missiles on stealth destroyers right now and developing additional delivery systems. China tested its first hypersonic glide vehicle in 2017 and has since built out an arsenal that the Pentagon has explicitly stated poses a threat not just to U.S. bases in the Pacific, but potentially to Hawaii, Alaska, and the continental United States. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has publicly warned about China's, in his words, huge investments in this domain. Russia entered the conversation loudly when Vladimir Putin announced the operational deployment of what he called the Oreshnik missile, claiming it travels at Mach 11 and is, in his characterization, immune to any missile defense system. Putin said it flies like a meteorite. Ukraine confirmed it clocked the weapon at Mach 11. The Pentagon categorized it as an experimental intermediate-range ballistic missile. Whether it has the maneuverability to qualify as a true hypersonic threat in the doctrinal sense remains contested. But the psychological and strategic effect of the claim that Russia possesses an unstoppable weapon operates independently of the technical fine print. In warfare, perceived capability and actual capability are not always the same thing, and the gap between them is where miscalculation lives. Russia also claims its Kinzhal missile is hypersonic. Ukraine successfully intercepted multiple Kinzhals using Patriot systems supplied by the United States, which substantially undermined Russia's narrative about the weapon's invulnerability. But in a separate regional conflict, the India-Pakistan confrontation over Kashmir, Pakistan claimed to have used hypersonic missiles launched from a warplane to destroy a Russian-built S-400 air defense system inside India's border Punjab state. If that claim is accurate, it represents the first confirmed battlefield destruction of an S-400 by a hypersonic weapon. And the strategic picture that emerges from all of these data points is not reassuring. The missile defense architecture that the Western alliance has spent hundreds of billions of dollars constructing over the past 3 decades was built around specific threat models. Those threat models are rapidly becoming obsolete, and the nations building the weapons that expose those obsolescences are not slowing down. Brazil, Australia, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and Iran all have hypersonic weapons programs in varying stages of development. The European Union is currently studying how to build an interceptor capable of defeating hypersonic threats, because no such interceptor currently exists in European arsenals. Bring it back to Iran specifically. The experts' consensus is nuanced in a way that most media coverage flattens. Iran does not currently appear to have the industrial capacity to manufacture true next-generation hypersonic glide vehicles. The thermal management challenges alone, building a reusable or single-use airframe that survives the temperatures generated by sustained Mach 5+ flight through the atmosphere, require materials science and manufacturing precision that most countries on Earth cannot achieve. Jack Wattling stated it plainly. The Iranians don't have the capacity to manufacture them in the full technical sense. But that assessment comes with a significant caveat. What Iran lacks in technical sophistication it attempts to compensate for through volume, variety, and strategic patience. Firing 400 missiles at once is itself a form of tactical hypersonic strategy, not because each individual missile is unstoppable, but because the sheer volume forces the defense to prioritize, and prioritization creates gaps. The hypersonic threat, in Iran's application of it, is less about one unbeatable weapon and more about degrading defense system decision-making through saturation. You overwhelm the operators. You exhaust the interceptor inventory. You make the system choose which incoming threats are most dangerous. And in that choice, in that cognitive and logistical triage, something gets through. When something gets through in a conflict between nuclear-adjacent regional powers with American forces embedded in the theater, the risk of escalation is not linear. It is exponential. One ship hit. One American base struck significantly. One decision by a commander under pressure to escalate response. The hypersonic threat in the Iran-Israel conflict is not just a technical weapons problem. It is a strategic stability problem. It is a crisis management problem. And the world does not currently have the arms control frameworks, the communication channels, or the de-escalation protocols to manage a hypersonic crisis in real time, at the